My guest today is Samantha Fox. Sam is a speech-language pathologist with a master's from Kent State University and the founder of Beyond Speech Therapy Center, where they focus on personalized therapy and building meaningful relationships with clients. As a registered Spelling to Communicate practitioner with deep expertise in early intervention, Sam brings a unique perspective to supporting non-speaking and minimal speaking individuals with autism, apraxia, and various speech sound disorders. Today's episode is all about speech-language pathology and spelling to communicate interventions. In addition, Sam will expand on presuming competence and apraxia as an overlooked medical condition. By the end of this episode, we hope you learn more about speech-language pathology and spelling to communicate. I'll just get right into it then.
Cool. I'm good with that.
Yeah. So when did speech-language pathologists kind of become more mainstream?
In general,
Mm-hmm.
that's a great question. Not one that I have a direct answer for you. I mean, speech pathology has been around for quite some time. I've been practicing for about 6 years. And I got trained in spelling to communicate about coming up on 4 years ago.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I was just wondering because like the Kenner kids, Kenner had one complete nonverbal, and then there was two others. Like I think one had like selective mutism. It seemed like the other one was just like would only speak around peers. So I was just wondering like what the history of with these types of interventions back then.
Yeah.
Just curiosity. But I would like to start with like continuing on your history and like how and when did you learn about spelling to communicate?
So I first learned of spelling to communicate back in undergrad. So this would have been around, I'd say 2015-ish. I volunteered even prior to that with a 7-year-old who is non-speaking, apraxic, autistic. He's 18 now, so that's been quite some time. But I volunteered with him. At the time, he was using more traditional alternative communication, so a talker, and I volunteered with him. I fell in love with working with non-speaking autistics. He completely opened my world in that regard. And then I went on to graduate school, had to stop volunteering with him, just was pressed for time. And after I graduated, I started working at a clinic, and they knew to put the non-speaking autistics on my caseload because I loved working with them. And I was trained in Hannon at that time, which is a social developmental model to support autistics, really based in connection and following their lead, building communication that way. And the social developmental model is still, I absolutely subscribe to that. However, I think now I've just found that there's more to be addressed than just the connection piece. I do recognize the importance of it, but I had been using that for years with my clients, and I was just seeing very minimal progress for most of them as it related to robust communication. And so I stayed connected with this little boy. His name is Kaden. He's not little anymore, like I said, but I stayed connected with his mom. And because I had so many that were similar to him on my caseload, I kind of went to her and I was like, hey, listen, I have a ton that are really similar to Kaden. What's your suggestion? You know, how do I help support them? And she was like, I really think you need to look into spelling to communicate. And so they had gone to Virginia, where the headquarters is for spelling. And because there was nobody local at the time that could work with them. So they went to Virginia, they did what we call an intensive. They got started, and his mom learned how to start working with him on the letterboards. They came back, didn't go back for another year. Mom just like really did the work at home with him. And so they had been on this journey for several years at this point. So I'm out of school, haven't worked with Kaden for a few years, just kind of like really getting into my groove as a speech therapist. She tells me I should look into spelling to communicate. And I went through quite a process with that, to be honest with you, because I Googled it. And if you Google it, you will see tons. It doesn't end. And I read through everything. I read through the things that were very supportive of spelling to communicate. And my God, I dissected all of the things that were just saying that it is not legitimate, especially the ASHA statement from the National Speech and Hearing Association. Like that statement, I read many, many times, and I thought, I don't know. I've only been a speech therapist for a little over 2 years. Who am I to go kind of like against essentially what the national organization is stating? But at that point, Kaden had spelled to me a quote that I will never forget at this point. And I watched him touch one letter at a time to spell, "Use your awesome, powerful heart to love the strange and fabulous people like me." And at this time, Kaden, gosh, how old was Kaden? He had to have been about 13, 14 years old, completely non-speaking, spells this out. And I said, okay, I'll take the training. And at that point, I wasn't even convinced, to be honest, for multiple fronts. Like one, I kind of had the mentality that Kaden was an exception. Like I knew he could do it. I watched him spell. Like I was watching in front of my eyes. I knew it was real, but I was thinking about all of my kids on my caseload. And I just like was not convinced at the time that spelled communication was going to be as widely applicable as what I found it to be. But also I just thought, let me at least take the course and learn, get the knowledge, and then decide if I think that it's legitimate versus just going off of what I'm reading on the internet, which is really giving both sides. Like, let me make the determination myself whether I think it's something legitimate. So I took the course, I took the leap of faith in that way. And everything that I learned in the course made way more sense than a lot of what I had learned in graduate school as it pertained to autistic individuals who were non-speaking, minimally speaking. And I ended up opening my own practice shortly after because there was nobody in the area that was doing this or very supportive of it. And it's just flipped everything on its head. And now we have about, last count was probably right about 75 spellers that we're working with currently in Northeast Ohio here, ages 4.5 to, I think our oldest is around 35 right now. So it's a really broad range of ages.
Okay. Wow, that's fascinating. Can you tell us a little bit about Beyond Speech Therapy Center?
Yeah, I would love to. So I had always thought that I wanted to open my own practice, but it's just overwhelming when you start to look at it. Honestly, I had a ton of encouragement from my mom on that front. Like I said, it was so niche because it didn't exist. And so initially I started reaching out to places in Northeast Ohio that already existed that were specialized in working with autistic individuals, and I had said to them, like, hey, I'm getting trained in this. Like, do you have any interest? And everybody was like, no. And I was like, all right, well, I guess then I have to create it. Is really like what it came down to. It doesn't exist, so here we go. The practice opened early 2022, and very shortly after opening, it was just me by myself. I was certified at that point as a spelling to communicate practitioner, but I was doing kind of a combination of quote unquote more traditional speech therapy, early intervention, and spelling to communicate. A few weeks into opening the practice, I got a cold call from my now partner in crime over here, who is the occupational therapist, Emma Fiorita. She called me and she said, hey, do you need an occupational therapist? And I said, sure. And so she came on, and she was working with a lot of my spellers on occupational therapy goals. Mm-hmm. And so she had got to see them be able to be more of an active participant in therapy, because when she's working on sensory things, getting their feedback is so reliable. Like, hey, is this how you're feeling about this? Or is this helping? Is this hurting? Getting feedback made her sessions just a lot smoother. And so initially I was like, hey, you should get trained as an S2C practitioner. And she was a little hesitant at first, but within a few months, she was like, all right, I want to do this. And now she's a phenomenal practitioner. And since then, it's just, it's grown. Emma's been with me from the beginning, but we have a few awesome speech therapists. We have 2 more spelling to communicate practitioners. We have a nice little team of 8 here. So it's growing at a nice rate, and we do most of our caseload. I'd say probably upwards of 85% of our caseload are minimally speaking, non-speaking autistics here.
Okay. So with that 8 being certified in spelling or as for spellers, mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about what it takes to get that qualification or that training?
Yeah. So we have 4 right now that are specifically spelling to communicate practitioners. And so it's myself, and Emma has a background in occupational therapy. We also have a recreation therapist who just got trained as an S2C practitioner. And then our 4th, her background is actually in marketing, but her brother is a speller, and so she had interest and connection there, so she got trained as well. So as far as her
mom's a saint.
Oh yes, of course, yes, yeah. That's how we got connected. Yes, you know this. Isn't she the best? I love her. Side note, she is just one of the best parents ever. She would always come in with her pad of paper, diligently taking notes, like always just like, I want to know what I can do at home to support him, and is just like as on top of it as you could wish that any of the parents could be in this process. So she is, I agree. As far as like background, what's required? First of all, the training is not through Beyond Speech Therapy Center. I will say that for anyone listening, because you'd be surprised the number of calls I get from out of state that are like, hey, I'm interested in taking the training. And I'm like, that's awesome. Let me refer you to I-ASC. It's I-ASC. Don't forget the dash is what they always say. It stands for International Association for Spelling as Communication. They are headquartered in Virginia. They are the ones who do the training for spelling to communicate. So these are not my guidelines or my training. This is theirs, and you should check them out anyways. They're incredible and they do awesome work. But they do not, as of right now, to my knowledge, there is not a educational background requirement to go ahead and take the spelling to communicate training. Some have therapy backgrounds, some have different special education backgrounds, some are parents and siblings, and there's a nice variety in that regard. The training itself is about 6 months. Most of it is done virtually through seminars, and you have to submit yourself videos of working with spellers, and they're always like adding and tweaking things. So really, if anybody is interested in that training, I would have to say like refer them to the website so that they can see. But it is about a 6 month. It's definitely a graduate level course, and it prepares you to work with any motor profile. So, AKA any student that walks in, you're going to feel equipped to support their motor, which I'm sure we're gonna dive into more there. But that's what the course will do. So it's not for like, if you just want to work with one, like if you're listening and you're just like, hey, I just want to work with my child spelling. You don't have to go become a practitioner. Being a practitioner, meaning going through that whole training, really the people who are going to do that are the people who want to have this as like a career. You're going to work with multiple spellers. They're going to come to you. You're going to walk them through the process. If you just want to be a communication partner, is what we would call that, a CRP, communication and regulation partner is CRP. That is something that your practitioner will help you to do. So it's not something you have to pay for an additional training. Usually, like, let's say you have a child and you're wanting to get them started with it, you would call a practitioner in your area. You would have your child start seeing that practitioner. And as part of the sessions, your practitioner should be training you or coaching you how to work with your child on the letter boards. So you don't need to go through like a 6-month training necessarily for that. That's something that should be part of those regular sessions. And I know there's sometimes a hurdle with, there isn't maybe a practitioner in my area, or maybe cost is a hurdle in that regard. I cannot recommend enough getting with somebody who can provide you resources. I-ASC is a great resource for that, to provide other resources in terms of how to connect you, how to get that funding. They're going to be awesome for that. If you're in Northeast Ohio, reach out. I will help you. I help all of the families that contact me for that. Out of state, I'm definitely less helpful, to be honest. But working with a practitioner regularly is, I cannot recommend that enough, because there's so much to this process. You watch a video of spelled communication and you're like, yep, I could just plop a letterboard in front of somebody and they can communicate. Anyone who's been through it will tell you, I wish it was that easy. That would be awesome. But it's just not. And so that practitioner guidance keeps you from trying it and then being like, oh, my kid can't do it. They can. You just need the correct support, and you need somebody who's going to be able to guide you through the inevitable tricky moments, because anybody who is non-speaking is going to have a tricky body at times, because they have something called Apraxia. So they don't have control over their bodies a lot.
Yeah. It's almost like the people that, the autistics that don't have that they are nonverbal, that they have the Apraxia problem.
Yes, exactly.
There's something that's underlooked or overlooked, I think, is Apraxia.
It is. Yeah, it's really mistaken a lot, to be honest, as an intellectual, a cognitive, a behavioral difficulty, where that's where my background came from, is like, okay, well, I'm looking at it as they're not communicating. My job is to figure out why, right? And so when you start to dissect, why is somebody not communicating? A lot of times what people fall to is they're not communicating because they don't understand anything that's going on around them. If you really think about that, like, to me, it just seems insane. Like, it seems insane to just think that somebody has been living in the world 5, 10, 15, 20, 50 years,
and just doesn't understand anything going on around them. That's actually more unbelievable to me than the opposite. But unfortunately, because they don't have a way to prove what they know or to reliably communicate, that's often the default. Is okay, they're not communicating because they just don't understand. The other side of that is a lot of times people assume they're not communicating because they don't want to. And that's where you get into the behavioral side of things. Like if, they're just basically refusing, like they have it in them, like I know they can do it, but they're just not. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that can be really tricky because like they will communicate some things, but then in other instances, it's inconsistent. And so people try to make sense of that. I get that. But a lot of times it's not that they're just refusing to communicate. People have an innate want to connect with others and communicate in most instances. Sure, you have times of overwhelm, like most people are like, okay, I don't want to talk to anybody, like get out of my face. Sure, that exists. I'm not saying that never does, but to place the assumption that somebody isn't communicating because they just want to be disconnected from everybody else in the world is tough. So, when I'm looking at that, it's like, those are the two main beliefs though. It's that they don't understand and that's why they're not communicating, or they just don't want to. And so those never really made sense to me even before I did the Spelling to Communicate training. What I really fell on was this belief that they're not communicating, not because they don't want to or not because they don't understand, but because they're kind of quote unquote in their own little world. And it's like, I say it now and it feels silly coming out of my mouth, but there was no other, real explanation at that point. And I knew I didn't believe the other two. And so I was like, okay, they're just in their own little world, which is why I kind of subscribed at that point to the belief, like, if I can just get in there, if I can enter their world and make them feel comfortable, like they'll want to communicate, they're going to come out of their shell, I can kind of help them to connect in that way and therefore help them to communicate. But that's not accurate either. That's not the whole picture, because many spellers, I'm going to speak. I know this is broad, but I will say it. I believe all spellers. I believe all non-speakers. They do understand. They do want to communicate. They're not in their own little worlds, but they don't have the control over their body to be able to show you any of that. Yeah. And so they can want all of those things. It doesn't matter. They can be in our world, right in our face, wanting to communicate, craving connection. But if they don't have a way to tell us that, what do? We have to assume. But unfortunately, the assumption is almost always those things that I'm telling you. So when we start to presume competence, meaning, it's like a buzzword right now, presume competence, which is great, but like, what does that actually mean?
Yeah, I was going to ask you. So
right, okay. It's important because it is like I said, I see it all the play. I'm like, are people really like understanding though what that means? It doesn't mean that we believe all non-speaking individuals, minimally speaking, I use that as an umbrella term, by the way. That's how non-speaking, it doesn't mean that there's absolutely no speech. A lot of our spellers do have a decent amount of speech. Some of them, like, the blue whale is swimming in the ocean, but then you ask them like, hey, what did you think about that movie? And they can't answer that, okay? That still falls under the umbrella of non-speaking. So I'll probably use that for simplicity. But when you have somebody who can't communicate with their speech fully, we need to presume that they understand everything that a peer that is speaking their age would understand. So if I have a 13-year-old non-speaking individual, I assume that they understand every single thing that a 13-year-old would understand if they were speaking, a neurotypical individual. I believe that. Personally, I think they understand more than their neurotypical peers, but that's just because I've been blessed by my experience thus far working with non-speakers. But at a bare minimum, we need to presume they understand. Okay, but what if my kid is standing in the corner and jumping up and down and screaming at the top of their lungs? Like, they surely don't understand what's going on in the room and what's being said. Yes, they do. I do believe that they do understand and that they are aware of what's going on. So talking to them at the same age you would talk to a 13-year-old, that's important. Presuming that they understand everything that's said, even when it looks like they are in their own little world, quote unquote. Okay. That's really important. Providing them an education that's in line with what you would provide to a 13-year-old. We're not working on colors. I'm not working on letter recognition. They know, and I can and will get into that. Why can't they show it then? Well, if they know it, why can't they prove it? That's a whole nother can of worms. But presuming competence means you're going to treat somebody the exact same way you would treat somebody else their age if they were speaking. That's honestly, if you follow that base, that is presuming competence. You don't have to believe that all non-speaking individuals are locked-in geniuses. This is like a big thing in this world too. Listen, do I think that they understand way more than they can express? Yes, I do. However, you don't even have to believe that. All you have to believe to presume competence is that they are capable of learning. And anyone who will sit and say, I don't believe so-and-so is capable of learning, shouldn't be a teacher, shouldn't be somebody supporting them. You have to believe that they are capable of learning regardless of what their body is showing you. And when you start to address things from a different perspective, which is what I'm saying, okay, I'm throwing out social developmental model, I'm throwing out the behavioral model. We've used those. They're not getting our kids, our adults at some point where they need to be. They're in their 20s and still can't express basic wants and needs, let alone desires and opinions and preferences for their own life. They don't have autonomy. The models we've been using, I'm not saying they're not appropriate for anyone, but there is more to the picture. And so when we start approaching from a motor deficit perspective, meaning I believe you're in there, I believe your body just has a mind of its own. I believe your mind and body are basically two different entities. Like, you know what's going on up here, you know what you want to say, but when you try to move your mouth doesn't say what you want it to say. And when you try to move your body doesn't do what you want it to do. And so if I've been using a social developmental model, which is what a lot of speech therapists will, if your kid's in speech therapy, that's probably what they're using, is some sort of social developmental model. That's the theory. If they're not, then maybe they're an ABA. Okay, they're targeting it from a behavioral approach. Is that what I would do? No. Does it mean it's wrong? No. My only challenge to that is, if your kid has been in quote unquote traditional speech therapy their entire life, and they've been in ABA their entire life, and they're still having difficulty communicating, it might be worth looking at another perspective, let's target the difficulty. I shouldn't say problem, but the difficulties from a different perspective. And that's what I love about spelling to communicate, and why I always say it's not quote unquote just communication. It's not just about the letterboard. It's a completely different shift in the way that we're approaching the difficulties that they're having with communication. And I have found that approach and targeting from that perspective is so much more regulating, For the individuals, I have seen so much more growth than I had with the traditional speech therapy. And it's not, I really want to make it clear that it's not me saying that I believe traditional speech therapy is bad. I don't. I'm a speech therapist. I use those techniques too. I just think there's so much more that the field is missing here. And we have to, I do say it with some sense of urgency. Like, we have to start looking at this. Like, we have at this point thousands of non-speakers who are telling us, my body not doing what I want it to do. And still people are like, oh no, that's not real. Like, yes, it is. It is real. And they're telling us their lived experience. And just, even if it's hard for us to wrap our brains around, it doesn't mean that that's not their lived experience, right? So I can't even remember. I just keep going off on tangents on you, Ryan, but
It's perfectly accurate. Humans hate when we can't make sense of things.
yes.
It really provides us a lot of conflict, and we don't like that.
Yep.
So we'll just push it into this box of our own understanding and say, that must be it.
Yes.
I hate that.
Yes. Me too. Just continuous learning is like, I just, the backbone of what we should all be doing, right? Like, there's so much that we do not know. And I'm the first to say that. And even though I'm a huge S2C proponent, they know, like, the people who do the training and they will say to you, yeah, we're still learning, we're still researching, but we need to support at the best level that we can. And that's by presuming competence, because otherwise these guys are stuck learning the same thing for 21 years. They're in school till they're 21, a lot of them. And they still have these goals to, like, identify common objects. It's like, what? I would also be going crazy. I would be throwing stuff, right? Like, there comes a point where if you're a non-speaker, unfortunately, you've experienced trauma because you haven't been able to express yourself. And then those guys can't get therapy because a lot of therapy is based in talk, communication. And so they're just, like, struggling with this on their own for years and years and years and years. And yes, there are sensory motor differences that make regulation challenging, but there's also all of this, psychological side of thing that can't be ignored. It's like, you've been essentially trapped in your body. So do I think they hurt people with intent? No, I don't. Broadly, I really don't. But do I think that they just do not know how to work through emotion? Like, their body and their nervous system is so traumatized in a lot of cases that I think they just they don't know how to do that, and they can't ask for help with it. And so it just creates this cycle of, like, yeah, we have a lot of guys that can be physical. Like I said, I never think that it's intentional for them to be, like, what people would describe as aggressive or hurting people with intent. I never, ever, ever think that's the case. But it's just, there's a lot to dissect. So, me going into that is just another way of saying there's so much that we don't know. There's so much under the surface here that we're just starting to really understand these things at a deeper level. And so I just choose to be open-minded. Like, hey, like, does it make sense to me? Maybe. Even if it doesn't make sense to me, do I accept it? Yeah, I do, because it's coming from the people who are, experiencing it. So, so much we don't know.
Yeah. It's well said. I have two comments based off of what we've talked about so far, but I'm just sitting here imagining that an ABA therapist almost needs training in spelling. Yeah. That way they can convey, there's like a back and forth conveyance.
Yes.
But, I have a hard time saying that people need this or, we should require this. But it seems like it's like so obvious. Like, they need to be able to communicate back and forth, because ABA is very questionable.
It's, and I've talked to a few ABA therapists or techs, and they've said, well, everything is behavior, so you can't really argue with the science of ABA. But where I kind of have I could go off, but like where I have the pause in that statement, okay, is that there is an assumption that all behavior is intentional. And so this is another like buzzword phrase right now, quote, like shirts. All behavior is communication. And people wear that and like it's well meaning. I get what you are saying. All behavior is communication, but not all behavior, not all actions are intentional. And if somebody doesn't have a way of communicating, they can't tell you whether something was intentional or not. And so, like, to give you a real life example, the kid I was taught, he's an adult now, but Kaden, who I was talking about earlier, his body, so he calls his body Gus, because that's how disconnected he feels. Like his brain, Kaden is who he is. Gus is what his body does. And so a lot of times, Kaden's been spelling for like 10 years. Okay. So he's very, very practiced. A lot of times when I put down the letterboard, even to this day, I see him every week. I put down the letterboard and Gus will hit the letterboard out of my hand so hard. Like what people would look at and say, that was aggressive. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then Kaden will spell a lot of times, some rendition, not verbatim, but I'm sorry. I did not mean to do that. I don't know why Gus is hitting my impulse. It's an impulse for his body to do sometimes because he's overstimulated or dysregulated, right? But it's not coming from a place of, I'm trying to smack that out of your hand and hurt you. And he has just, every time he has the opportunity to like clarify, he does. But let's say he didn't have communication. Then what happens? We assign intentionality to that. And we are like, whoa, that behavior communicated to me that you don't want that letterboard there, or that you don't want to communicate, or even worse, like you're not being compliant with what I'm asking you to do. Like you're just being difficult. Right? Like those are some of the things that people are going to say if they see that action in isolation. It's not as black and white as that. Sometimes might things be intentional? Sure. But unless they have a reliable way to communicate, how can we do it? How can we say?
It's just guessing.
It's such a conundrum, really, because like then you're like, oh well, if you have a non-speaking or minimally speaking individual, they can't really use speech to communicate. So what do we rely on? Body language. But guess what? Body language isn't always reliable with individuals with apraxia. So we can't just see what their body's doing and be like, oh yeah, that's definitely what they did or didn't want. Sometimes it might be, but sometimes it might not be. And that's where you get into this like really difficult back and forth, and why they need the communication to tell you like, hey, yeah, I hit that out of your hand because I'm mad right now. I'm not telling you can't feel that way. Go ahead, but tell me that that's what you intended then. For the record, he's never said that. But he could. He could say anything he wanted. He has 26 letters. He could say whatever he wanted.
The other comment or thought that I had is, are there any data with self-injurious behaviors before and after spelling?
That's such a good question. I think there are a couple of different people. I've seen some threads of people talking about this. I will tell you anecdotally, we have had many families tell us that the dysregulation / physical behaviors that were going on with their spellers significantly decreased once they started spelling. I think in part that's because of the presumption of competence. Like, oh my gosh, you've lived 20 years with everybody thinking that you didn't understand anything. And then you have somebody who says, hey, I know you're in there. Whoa, okay, like think about the weight that just takes off by itself. Because some of these people, what's interesting about it is that they'll say that dysregulation decreased even before the speller got to the point where they could communicate their thoughts. Okay, because that's a long process. Like that sometimes is years and years. So just presuming competence, just telling them like, hey, I know you're in there, and starting to work from a different route, like I'm talking about with that motor stuff, that just on its own, not even communication, has a lot of times decreased the dysregulation, which is really interesting to me. That makes sense.
Yeah, that's incredible. Because a lot of times the self-injurious behavior is the head. So, they just hitting the head.
Yep.
And some people might have like biting.
Yes.
It's all so, it's wild.
Yes.
So can we just start with, or transition into like going through the process of how to even begin the spelling to communicate?
Yeah.
For beginners. I know you touched a little bit about it earlier, but just walk through like how somebody might begin, and then just like the intervention, the processes and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do, like, before I get right into that, I do want to kind of touch a little bit on apraxia, just because I think it's really important for anybody who's listening. I know I've like thrown the term around a few times today, but I kind of want to give some reassurance to people who might be listening, because it's so rare that I have somebody come in with an actual apraxia diagnosis. Okay. So I don't want people to listen to this and be like, oh, well, that's not going to be applicable to my child. 95% upwards of 95% of the time, somebody comes in with their child is not able to fully communicate with speech. Okay. That could be that they have no speech at all. That could be that they have some sounds. That could be that they have 50 words that they can use for items that they seem to like or need. That could be that they have full sentences. Like I said, they can script entire TV shows or sing songs, but their conversational speech, that's where we're really like red flag for apraxia, is if they can maybe get some sounds out, maybe some words, but if you ask them about something that is a non-routine question, you read them a story and you're like, what did you think of that? You watch a movie. Hey, did you like that movie? They might be able to give you a yes or no, but okay, what did you like about that? Can they answer that? Some of those things, like I get the crossover, because some people would look at those and be like, oh, well, that, if they can't answer that, maybe that is a cognitive thing, which yes, I am not saying that doesn't exist. But if they've been in traditional therapy and it doesn't really seem to be connecting the dots in the way that you had hoped over years, that's when I would start to think like, I wonder if apraxia might be affecting them. And apraxia, very simplified, is a disconnect between the brain and the body. So what all spellers have in common, most of them are autistic, not all of them. There are individuals with Down syndrome. Unidentified intellectual disability is one that I've seen, a lot of syndromes. These individuals at their core, what they all have in common is that they have global apraxia. Their brain is not communicating well with their body, including their mouth. So all of that to say, I just want to make sure that people aren't thrown off by the term apraxia. Most of my families have never even heard it who come to me. So like that's not bizarre if you're sitting and listening to that. And if you're wondering like, well, how do I know? If you go see a practitioner, if you go see somebody who is trained in spelling to communicate, they should be able to, during that first visit, they're gonna look at the markers of apraxia. And there are going to be certain things that are going to show those apraxic tendencies, and they're going to be able to show you that. So that's my little, I guess, disclaimer before I get into the actual process. So
That was necessary, I think.
Sorry.
That was necessary.
Oh, good. Okay. I'm glad. I didn't,
Yeah.
it's like, it's one of those things, like, it's just teasing out. Cause I know so many parents just feel lost. I mean, and this is what they've described to me, right? They're like, we've tried everything. Like, that is something I hear. I can't tell you how many families have told me that. We've tried everything. It's nothing is really working. Okay. We've tried all those other things. Like, let's try, give it another chance. You got to stay consistent. But I'm not here to tell you what to do or what to try. I just want to make sure people know that this exists and that people are seeing real differences, not only in communication, but their regulation, their day-to-day activities. Like, this is really, that it is changing people's lives. And I want people to know about it. So if you connect with a practitioner, it's growing. There are a decent amount of practice. I don't know how many there are right now in the United States, but there's a decent amount. You can go on that I-ASC, so I-ASC.org. They have a map that'll show you where practitioners are. So you can easily look and see where one is near you. From there, I'll speak from my experience. People might do things a little bit differently. But I think for most practitioners, they see their spellers once a week for about 60 minutes, seems to be pretty standard. People always ask when they call, well, how long is my speller going to need to, or my child going to need to be in this therapy? Difficult to say, just like if you asked about speech, well, how long are they going to need speech therapy? That's also going to be a challenging question to ask, right? But what I can tell you is starting from the beginning to getting some open-ended communication. So a lot of people will just say it's open. Getting to open is what you'll hear. What that means is that the individual is able to openly express their thoughts, their feelings, their opinions, their preferences, okay? We don't start by asking. We can't just put a letter, again, I wish it was this easy. We can't just put a letterboard down in front of them and start going into, well, what did you think about the movie? That would be awesome. But they haven't yet developed the motor skills to be able to get their eye on the target and their hand to follow through and hit the target that they want. We have to explicitly teach them, like, what does that sound like? Move your eyes to the left, reach your arm forward, bend your elbow. Like, we're really coaching their motor system to be able to accurately choose letters. We work under the assumption that they know all of their letters and they know how to spell the moment they walk in the door. That's like, we're not teaching them how to spell. We already know that they've been exposed, in most cases, they've been exposed to literacy since they were 2 years old and watching Sesame Street and listening to songs on the radio and looking at books and signs, and they pick this up. Is it a little bit of a mystery to me? Sure, in some cases it is. But when you really think about what master observers, most people will say this about their non-speaking child. They'll say, oh yeah, they don't miss a thing. Like they're looking, right? Like they are observing the environment around them. And a lot of times they don't have the motor skills to play with toys in the way that their same age peers are playing with toys. So what's always around? If I can't play with toys, I can look around right now and see 15 things with text on it around me. Text is always around, and these guys are taking it in. So you start to pair that with, like, yeah, I've listened to the phonics Coco Melon song 4 bazillion times, and I have text around me. They start putting this stuff together. They're taking in their environment. So anyways, another tangent there for you. But they come in and we presume that they already know how to spell. So if they already know how to spell, why can't I just put this in front of them and then they can spell their thoughts? Okay. Because of apraxia. So they cannot skip, like, apraxia also affects the eyes. We call it ocular motor apraxia. You and I probably take this for granted. I can read, I can scan things very easily. They can also read. A lot of times that's misjudged because they can't use their speech to read aloud, but we can read in our heads, right? So they can also read in their mind. But we're looking at scanning all of these letters, not only scanning them, but then being able to jump your eyes between letters, because if I want to spell flamingo, my eyes need to jump from the F to the L to the A to the M. Okay, so I need a lot of intentional motor control of my eyes to be able to do that. But also, I need to sustain my visual gaze, lock in on the letter that I want, and then I have to move my arm to select the letter that my eyes are fixated on. Hand-eye coordination. So if you've ever noticed that it looks like an individual who's non-speaking can't quote unquote pay attention, their eyes are just like their head's moving, their eyes are everywhere. I see this all the time. A lot of times that's just because they do not have the eye control, the motor of the eyes to get their eyes to stop and sustain the gaze. And then that hand-eye coordination is another level to it. So they come in and we actually start with what we call the 3-letter boards. So the alphabet is split into 3s. Why do we do this? Because of what we just said. This now is not 26 letters to scan. This is 8 to 9 letters to scan, which is going to be easier on the eyes. Also, larger targets. So when I'm working on hand-eye coordination, a larger target is going to be easier. So we start with this. And I think it's important too to tell people, you do not start with open-ended questions. I think that's a really big misconception where it's like, well, you're showing them like where to go, you know, that's it's not real. And it's like, okay, well, if I read you a lesson about flamingos and then I say, what are we talking about today? And I hold this in front of you and then my hand goes like this and I show you right to the F. They're like, oh my gosh, you're showing them where to go. Yes, I have to teach them what they need to do with their eyes so that they can lock in on that target. And then I have to teach them what they need to do with their arm to make it work in conjunction with their eyes. That's why I'm not asking them, what's your favorite animal? And then leading them to spell flamingo. I don't know what their favorite animal is. I can't prompt them to an answer that I don't know. And so we use lessons in that way. We're like, we'll read to them a very age-appropriate lesson about why are flamingos pink. It has to do with their diet. We use bigger words. We spell them out for them. And then we ask them questions based on what we read. Not because we're testing their comprehension, because we assume that they understood everything that we just read to them, even when they're pacing around the room, jumping up and down, screaming, like all of that. And that looks bizarre to families. They're like, wait a second, what do you mean? How are they listening? You will be shocked what they are picking up when they look like they are not paying attention at all. My favorite is when families spell things to me like they are not they're trying to be discreet, so they're spelling things to me, and I'm like, you know that like they're listening to that and get it right now. But we start with this, and sometimes we do start with a really strong prompt. Like sometimes I literally am pointing right to the letter, but it's because it's a known answer. It's something that I just read. There's only one answer that they could possibly be going to, and I need to be able to show their body how to accurately hit those letters, so that eventually when we fade our prompting, just like any other therapy, there's never hand over hand in spelling to communicate for the record. Our hands are not on the speller, but sometimes we do provide a strong visual prompt because once we move to this and we fade back our visual, meaning I'm no longer going like this across the board, because now we're starting to spell like, hey, if you had a pet flamingo, what would you name it? You can start with any letter on that board. I don't know where you're going for that. Okay. And so we get to the first time we get to open communication or open questions is on this 26 stencil. There are adapted boards. There are different versions that you'll see. The practitioner that you work with will guide you. Once for these stencils, we use a pencil. The speller uses a pencil to poke through. It provides a good amount of input because the whole arm is moving in spelling to communicate. So the way they describe this is it's taking the fine motor out of communication. Everything we use to communicate with our mouth is fine motor. Speech, very, very fine motor and intricate movements of the articulators. But then also thinking about sign language. This is a ton of fine motor to be able to sign. Okay? Or writing, a ton of fine motor. And so a lot of times people will say like, oh, well, what about these other avenues? It's like, those are good avenues, but they still require a lot of fine motor control, and they don't involve explicitly teaching the motor, because like so many families have tried sign language. I mean, I think that's something just, or even like a regular talker, you know, where it's like hit the picture and like communicate. Those are great. The issue isn't with those methods themselves. The problem is that we're not teaching the motor of you need to move your eyes down. You need to reach your arm forward, because we're just assuming when they hit the wrong letter or the wrong icon that they didn't understand. So then we just keep teaching them the same thing over and over. And we're like, no, more means that you're going to get more. You hit go, you know, or whatever that is. It's like, that's not going to get us anywhere, because we're not teaching their body what their body needs to do. Here are the physical movements that your body needs to do to be able to accurately poke a letter. And so with time, they get even more accurate on this. And then we move to a laminate board. This is in like most of the YouTube videos, if you watch, this is what a lot of people will see. No pencil anymore. We're starting to use the finger. We don't need that input. The arm movement is solid by that point. We're moving the whole arm in a gross motor way, which is helpful for most. And from here, at this point, they're going to be able to tell you, you know, if they're open on this laminate board, you can ask them, hey, what are your goals? For most individuals, they want to be as independent as possible. So a lot of them, they choose at that point that they want to move to the keyboard. Does everybody make it to the keyboard? No, but a lot of people listen, if they can openly express themselves on a laminate board or even a stencil, if you can say everything that you want to say with these, a lot of people are happy with that. And it's motor wise much easier for a lot of individuals to use those boards. So it's not like a standard that you move up to the keyboard, but I will say, especially in my own experience, a lot of the spellers do want to move to the keyboard. And then subsequently they want to move to a keyboard propped up on a stand. So somebody no longer holding the keyboard or the letter board for them is often a goal too.
Yeah, that makes sense, because it's just like any other goal.
Yeah.
You know, we set goals and we have these like little benchmarks, and it's no different for them, because they see that as like a greater accomplishment, I'm assuming.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, it's so challenging, especially the keyboard up on a stand. It is a ton of regulation control for the speller, but I have several that are doing it right now, and they're very successful. Like when you're able to create your own goals, that's another level of autonomy. That's motivate. That's intrinsic motivation. And so they really never cease to amaze me in terms of like what they what their goals are and what they envision for themselves, and having control of their life at that point is really what it's about a lot. Is like, I don't, is it bad to have to rely on somebody? No, we all rely on other people. We all rely on other people. But I get it. I get wanting to be as independent as possible with it as well. And it is, with practice, any motor plan, anything we practice over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, what happens? It gets easier. It even gets automatic
for us.
Yeah.
Driving a car is a really good example of something like you have to think a ton about when you first start, but once you do it, now you can multitask and drive the car, you know? And so that's what happens with that motor movement. I practice this. I practice my intentionality with my eye movements, and I practice intentionality with my arm working with my eyes.
Mhm.
And what happens over time? It becomes automatic. And when it becomes automatic, whoa, now I'm free. Like, I don't have to think so hard about every little thing that I'm doing. I don't have to think about turning on the blinker and the steering wheel and pushing the gas. And it's automatic for me now. So when that becomes automatic, now I can start to really access my thoughts, and get my thoughts out, just like talking to somebody in a car. If you were trying to have a conversation with them, the first time you tried to drive a car, you would have crashed the car, or you wouldn't have been able to hold a conversation with the person in the passenger seat, right? Not because you didn't understand anything that they were saying to you. You're so focused on your motor. It's a new motor plan, right? And so that's what happens with our spellers. And that's why if you plop down a letterboard in front of them, whoa, I haven't practiced driving the car and having a conversation at the same time yet. It doesn't work like that. So you have to build up that motor plan. You got to practice driving the car or poking the letters before you're really your mind is free enough and not focused so much on the motor that you can do that.
Yeah, as you explained that's exactly what I was thinking about. It's like an athlete practicing.
Exactly.
They're just constantly practicing.
Yep.
And it's the motor control. And I was also thinking even lower level or more so-called high functioning autistics have problems with speech and language, so those fine motor skills.
Yes.
So if we just even thinking about this more severe profound, so it's going to be much worse.
Yes.
And even the hand-eye coordination.
Yes.
All autistics have pretty bad hand-eye coordination.
Yeah.
So if you just think about the severe to profound, it's just going to be just so much worse.
Yeah.
And then you just have to practice that in.
Yep, you just have to practice it. That's it. That's why I say, as long as you think they're capable of learning, right? That's really the foundation. And I just, I think one thing that I had somehow skipped over, because I probably was talking about something else, knowing me, earlier, is I was starting to say that for somebody to get to open, I wanted to give that timeline for somebody because it's not immediate, and I don't think I got to it. So I wanted to say, for most spellers, it takes about a year to 18 months of consistent practice. Consistent meaning one time a week with a practitioner and multiple times a week at home. Doesn't have to be long at home, I always say, but if you can get in 4 to 5 times a week, 10 to 15 minutes, that's awesome. But that consistency, you're talking about sports and that practice, it's so important. And that's about how long it takes for most. Now, I will tell you, I've had spellers that it's taken less than 12 months, and I've had spellers that have taken 3 years of consistent practice. It depends on the level of apraxia that we're dealing with there. And I'm sorry, I'm going to move rooms because I know the therapist needs this room next. So I'm just going to take you on a little tour of my office, I guess, here, Ryan. her speller that's coming in really likes this room specifically. Yeah. So I want to get out of her way.
The way you described the different outcomes is ought to be expected because we all have different levels of and abilities, so it makes sense that getting to those points will be different as well. And a lot more people need more practice. Practice, the intensity and frequency varies for anything we do. So.
Yes.
What do you find? I have some questions about what are the barriers for spellers? I guess maybe less specific or more specific question is, what's the insurance coverage like for this?
Zero is what it is. Yeah, so spelling to communicate is not an insurance covered service. There are some fantastic resources out there. I-ASC provides a speller startup fund to cover some initial sessions, get people the letter boards, which is an initial investment for people. We have I established a nonprofit sector of my business here so that we could fundraise and provide scholarships to spellers who needed them. Sometimes county funding, depending on your practitioner. We're lucky because my background in speech and then Emma's background in occupational therapy gives us a little bit more flexibility because we can bill our services as speech and occupational therapy. So that's, but we're very creative and we try to be comprehensive in ways that we can get this covered for people. I really, it's very important to me that it's accessible. But I know that it just kind of depends on where you are in the country, who the practitioner is, and there's a lot of variables there. So certainly the financial aspect can be a barrier, but I think a lot of practitioners do have sliding scales as well, or they're going to be able to point you in the direction of getting some financial coverage. I know there's a lot of people working on getting it covered through insurance, so it's just it's a battle right now. So I think financially definitely a barrier. The other the main thing that comes to mind is just dysregulation to the point where the individual is unable to initially tolerate a long car drive to get to the practitioner, or they can't tolerate even initially being in the session with the motor demands that are placed. Sometimes it does take a decent amount of co-regulation and just kind of getting used to it and them trusting. Trust is so important, and trust isn't built in a day. So that's the other main thing that comes to mind. I've had parents call well, my child is going to hit, they're going to throw things, they're going to hit, they're going to smash their head, just a lot of difficult physical behaviors that come alongside things. I always tell them, there's nothing that, truthfully, there's nothing that could be said that would make me go, whoa, we can't help them. I think that it's just, there's a different plan and it needs to be individualized, but I hate to see people say, oh, this isn't going to work because my speller is going to have difficulty, or my child is going to have difficulty with their physical behaviors, because maybe, and I know that sounds silly, but maybe just really hearing from a professional, hey, I get it, you're in there. I'm not going to talk to you like you don't understand, because I know that you do. Sometimes that's regulated enough that they want to work for you then. They're okay, let's try this. And even sometimes they want to work, because they want to communicate, but their body still doesn't cooperate. That also could happen. But if you have a practitioner, they should be able to really walk you through what we can do to support their regulation, so that they can get to spelling on the boards, because we can't always just dive right in. I've had spellers, sometimes their motor is so tricky that I go months where we're just really working on hitting one letter, or I have spellers who have significant dysregulation challenges that we have to spend some time just building trust and co-regulation strategies together. So that's what I'd say the other big barrier probably is.
There are two things on your website that really stood out to me, and that's the individualized intervention and the meaningful relationships aspects. And I think
Yes.
maybe that's why maybe you just described the sources of those, and
Yeah.
it's probably more. This represents who you are, anyways.
Thank
But
you.
it seems like those are required,
I
or
think so. I think so.
yeah,
Sorry, I'm just gonna plug my computer in here and give you the full tour of the office today. But yeah, I mean, I think that you can't do anything without relationships and without connection. I mean, certainly. So that's why I say, like, that is my background, and that's what I come from. But I could recognize that it wasn't the whole. It just wasn't the whole picture.
mhm.
And individualization, that I'm very, very thankful for my therapy background. I think there's a lot that, even though I had an excellent graduate program, I think it's just like a more of a worldwide misunderstanding of a lot of things, in which I'm thankful to the course, the Spelling to Communicate course, for teaching me those things. But my therapy background and Emma's therapy background definitely, I think, help with the individualization, because we're just very used to that sort of therapy environment, kind of the hierarchies of support and the way that we interact with families. Like, those are things that are very guided by our background with those. So yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything else that we haven't talked about or covered that
We've
you seem you find necessary?
we've done a lot. It's so much, when I, like, every time I sit down, this is, like, I think my fourth podcast that I've done about this. And every time I sit down, I'm like, gosh, it's so much information. Like, and they teach you in the course, give your, like, little 5-minute, like, spiels about the different things. But even that, it's like, I give a 5-minute spiel and then it opens up 10 more cans of worms. So I think,
Necessary, though.
yeah, it is. It is. There's just so much. I'm basically trying to fit 6 months of a course and 4 years of experience into an hour. And so the biggest thing that I try to tell families is that there is a leap of faith, and it's the hardest part about Spelling to Communicate. Almost every single person who calls me says, I believe that it's real, but I don't know if it's going to be my kid. I don't know if my kid is going to be able to do this. And that is, I get it, but I tell you, almost everybody says that for a reason.
Yeah.
You don't get immediate proof, validation that they understand everything. You don't walk in on the first session in most cases, and they can just spell unassisted, and you're like, whoa, my gosh, they did understand everything the whole time. That's not realistic. But because the prompting has to be fated. And so initially, like I said, with Flamingo, where, like, maybe we're pointing right to the letter and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know if this is really going to go anywhere. They're showing them right where to go. My best advice in that moment is kind of trust the process, take the leap of faith, because you won't get immediate validation. However, it will come. Everybody has a different threshold for, like, what it takes for them to be like, whoa, okay, it seemed like they really knew that answer. But it will come if you stay consistent enough with it. Like, even though it takes that year to year and a half to 2 to 3 years, whatever, to get to open-ended communication, that doesn't mean that you're not going to see the progress, like, along the way. Like, you are going to see the progress from session to session to session. Doesn't mean you won't have bad days. Everybody does. But the leap of faith is the hardest pill to swallow. And I think, really, if we want to talk about a barrier, that is a hard, and it's an understandable barrier, because you have to, the parent has to
not be afraid to hope. And that is really, really, really hard for most parents and this is just from speaking to them that I know this. You have to be, open in that way. And even if you don't believe it at first, or you're a little skeptical, the leap of faith, unfortunately, is necessary. And I can tell you, every single parent who's here doing it with their child would tell you that it was absolutely worth it, but not that it was easy. So if it's something, people are open to learning about, learn about it. If you can go see a session in person, go see a session in person, because you can watch 1,000 videos. There is nothing like going to watch a speller who is open-endedly communicating in a session. It is awesome. And it probably will change your perspective. And you might still have that bit of like, oh, but is my kid going to be able to do it? But then when the parent who's sitting there with that speller who's typing says, yeah, I thought that too, you're going to feel a lot better. So Underestimated, the book Underestimated by J.B. Handley, is how most of my families got to me. It's written by a dad and his speller son. And I think it just resonates on a different level with families. So if you can get Underestimated, I know they have it on Amazon, and read it, that's a great way to learn more from like a parent perspective, because nobody gets it like another parent. And so I think really though, I think that's everything kind of in a nutshell. I probably could spend hours and hours and hours and hours talking about it, but that gives you a good snapshot, I think.
It is really good. I'm anxious to see what Spellers is like in 1 or 3 years from now, 5 years from now.
Yeah.
And you can come back and give us some updates, I hope.
I hope so. I think it's just a matter of time, to be honest, that things are really going to shift. And the research, they are working on the research, everybody's, but what about the double blind studies? And, it's like, they're working on it. They're working on it. And there are a couple of research studies, that do support, spelled communication. And, I encourage everybody to just to learn more and read both sides, and make the determination for yourself. But it's changed my life. I've learned so much from spellers, and I'm very thankful that my buddy Kaden guided me here, because that's really, he knows it too. He's very humble though, I will say, but he knows he's the reason we're all here at this office right now. So I appreciate you wanting to learn more about it, Ryan. And even like anything that I can do, my website does have a ton of information. BeyondSpeechTherapyCenter.com. There's a tab for Spelling to Communicate. I-ASC has a ton of information. So people who are wanting to learn more, that's where I'd say Facebook is great too. We post a lot of stuff, a lot of speller content on there. But it is kind of, people will refer to it as a revolution. I don't disagree with that. I think it really, like, the spellers are getting kind of fired up over here. I think about it, because they're like, listen, I don't want somebody to go through what I just went through, 20 years of, schooling that was way below where I was intellectually. So, I'm very thankful to be a part of it. It feels very surreal sometimes.
Yeah, it's amazing work.
Thank you so much.
Well, Samantha, I hope you have a great day, and keep doing this great stuff.
Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate you. We'll talk soon.
All right.